In the busy city of Lagos there lived a wealthy couple, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, who had one precious child named Brian. From the moment Brian was born, his parents adored him beyond measure. They showered him with love, gifts, and everything his heart desired. As Brian grew, his parents made sure he wanted for nothing, believing that their generosity was a way of showing their love. Brian's every whim was indulged. If he wanted a new toy, it was his. If he demanded sweets before dinner, his parents gave in. Whenever Brian misbehaved, which he often did, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson laughed it off as childhood antics. They believed that correcting him would stifle his happiness and creativity. "He's just a boy," they would say. "He'll grow out of it." As Brian entered school, his sense of entitlement grew. He had little respect for authority and often caused trouble in class. He would interrupt teachers, bully other children, and refuse to do his homework. When his teachers tried to discipline him, he would run home and tell his parents exaggerated stories of unfair treatment. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, blinded by their love for Brian, always took his side, storming into the school to demand apologies from the teachers and principals. As Brian grew into a teenager, his behavior worsened. He began skipping school, getting into fights, and hanging out with a crowd of delinquents. The Johnsons, still refusing to see the problem, continued to shield him from the consequences of his actions. When the police brought Brian home after he was caught vandalizing public property, his parents bailed him out without a second thought. "Boys will be boys," they said, dismissing the incident as a youthful mistake. But as Brian's sense of invincibility grew, so did his reckless behavior. He started engaging in illegal activities, convinced that his parents' wealth and influence would protect him. He took drugs, participated in dangerous street races, and eventually got involved in a robbery with his friends. The robbery was supposed to be a simple smash and grab, but things went horribly wrong. The group was caught, and this time, there was no easy way out. Brian was arrested, and the news spread like wildfire. The Johnson family, once respected and admired in their community, became the center of scandal and disgrace. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were devastated, but the worst was yet to come. During the trial, the full extent of Brian's crimes came to light. His involvement in other illegal activities was revealed, and it became clear that he had been leading a double life. The judge, determined to make an example of Brian, sentenced him to a lengthy prison term. As Brian was led away in handcuffs, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson broke down in the courtroom. They had failed to see the damage their overindulgence had done to their son. By never correcting his behavior, they had allowed him to believe that there were no consequences for his actions. Now, they were paying the price for their negligence, not just in the loss of their son's future, but in the destruction of their family's reputation and the heavy burden of guilt they would carry for the rest of their lives. The Johnsons were shunned by their community. Friends distanced themselves and business partners cut ties. Their wealth, which they had believed would protect them, became a source of resentment and scorn. They were forced to sell their luxurious home and move to a smaller, more secluded place to escape the whispers and judgment. But no matter where they went, the shame followed them. In their quiet moments, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson would sit together, reflecting on where they had gone wrong. They realized too late that true love isn't about giving a child everything they want, but teaching them the value of hard work, respect, and responsibility. They had failed to set boundaries, to discipline when necessary, and to guide Brian down the right path. And now, they were living with the consequences of their choices. The moral of this story is a stark reminder to parents everywhere. Love your children, but do not let love blind you to the importance of discipline and correction. Raising a child without guidance is like building a house without a foundation. It may look fine on the outside, but it will eventually crumble. Teach your children right from wrong, set boundaries, and correct them when they stray. In doing so, you protect not just their future, but the honor and well-being of your entire family.